a desirable benediction upon me, then I pray to you from your Lordship that within the core of my heart, I'm going to read this again. It has to be perfect. This is a very important verse. Thank you. O my Lord, best of the givers of benediction, if you at all want to bestow a desirable benediction upon me, then I pray from your Lordship that within the core of my heart there be no material desires. Purport. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us how to pray for benedictions from the Lord. He said, Nadanam najanam nasundadim kavitam ba jagadisha kamaye mama janmani janmani shvade bhavatad bhaktir haituki twayi. O my Lord, I do not want from you any amount of wealth, nor many followers, nor a beautiful wife, for these are all materialistic desires. But if I have to ask you for any benediction, I pray that in whatever forms of life I may take my birth, under any circumstances, I will not be bereft of your transcendental devotional service. Devotees are always on the positive platform, in contrast to the Mayavadis who want to make everything impersonal or void. One cannot remain void, shunyavadi. Rather, one must possess something. Therefore, the devotee on the positive side wants to possess something. And this possession is very nicely described by Prahlad Maharaj, who says, if I must take some benediction from you, I pray that within the core of my heart there may be no material desires. The desire to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not at all material. Text 8. O my Lord, because of lusty desires from the very beginning of one's birth, the functions of one's senses, mind, life, body, religion, patience, intelligence, shyness, opulence, strength, memory, and truthfulness are vanquished. Purport. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, kamam rid rogam, materialistic life means that one is afflicted by a formidable disease called lusty desire. Liberation means freedom from lusty desires, because it is only due to such desires that one must accept repeated birth and death. As long as one's lusty desires are unfulfilled, one must take birth after birth to fulfill them. Because of material desires, therefore, one performs various types of activities and receives various types of bodies with which to try to fulfill desires that are never satisfied. The only remedy is to take to devotional service, which begins when one is free from all material desires. Anyabilashita shunyam. Anyabilashita means material desire, and shunyam means free from. The spiritual soul has spiritual activities and spiritual desires as described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Mama janmani janmanishware bhavatad bhaktir haituki twayi. Unalloyed devotion to the service of the Lord is the only spiritual desire. To fulfill this spiritual desire, however, one must be free from all material desires. Desirelessness means freedom from material desires. This is described by Srila Rupa Goswami as anyabilashita shunyam. As soon as one has material desires, one loses his spiritual identity. Then all the paraphernalia of one's life, including one's senses, body, religion, patience, and intelligence, are deviated from one's original Krishna consciousness. As soon as one has material desires, one cannot properly use his senses, intelligence, mind, and so forth for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mayavadi philosophers want to become impersonal, senseless, and mindless, but that is not possible. The living entity must be living, always existing with desires, ambitions, and so on. These should be purified, however, so that one can desire spiritually and be spiritually ambitious without material contamination. In every living entity, These propensities exist because he is a living entity. In every living entity, these propensities exist because he is a living entity. I like that. In every living entity, these propensities exist because he is a living entity. When materially contaminated, however, one is put into the hands of material misery, janma mrityu jara-vyadi. If one wants to stop repeated birth and death, one must take to the devotional service of the Lord. Sarvapadi nivirnuktam tat padat nimanirmalam rishikesha sevanam bhakti uchite. Bhakti, or devotional service, means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is freed from all material designations, and simply by being employed in the service of the Lord, one's senses are purified. Text 9. O my Lord, when a human being is able to give up all the material desires in his mind, he becomes eligible to possess wealth and opulence like yours. Purport. Atheistic men sometimes criticize a devotee by saying, if you do not want to take any benediction from the Lord, and if the servant of the Lord is as opulent as the Lord himself, why do you ask for the benediction of being engaged as the Lord's servant? Sridhar Swami comments, Bhagavat samam aishvayaya Bhagavatva becoming as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not mean becoming one with him or equal to him, although in the spiritual world the servant is equally as opulent as the master. The servant of the Lord is engaged in the service of the Lord as a servant, friend, father, mother, or conjugal lover, all of whom are equally as opulent as the Lord. This is achintya bedha beda tattva. The master and servant are different, yet equal in opulence. This is the meaning of simultaneous difference from the Supreme Lord and oneness with him. Text 10. Om Namo Bhagavate Tubhyam Purushaya Mahatmane Haraye Bhuta Singhaya Brahmane Paramatmane. O my Lord, full of six opulences, O Supreme Person, O Supreme Soul, killer of all miseries, O Supreme Person in the form of a wonderful lion and man, let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. In the previous verse, Prahlad Maharaj has explained that a devotee can achieve the platform of Bhagavatva, being as good as the Supreme Person. But this does not mean that the Lord loses his position as a servant. Excuse me, I got distracted from a message up here. In the previous verse, Prahlad Maharaj has explained that a devotee can achieve the platform of Bhagavatva, being as good as the Supreme Person. But this does not mean that the devotee loses his position as a servant. A pure servant of the Lord, although as opulent as the Lord, is still meant to offer respectful obeisances to the Lord in service. Prahlad Maharaj was engaged in pacifying the Lord, and therefore he did not consider himself equal to the Lord. He defined his position as a servant and offered respectful obeisances unto the Lord. What do you mean?
For the record, somebody press said, getting what he said it.
Well, I was just appreciating how taking this, he's taking how Prahlad Maharaj said, Namo, I offer my respectful obeisances, and then he's saying now by definition, because he's offering his respectful obeisances, he's a servant. even though he's on the same level of opulence, he's not different from the Lord, and he's in the spiritual world and is a Nityasiddha. The difference remains because one person is addressed with "I offer my respectful obeisances to you," and the other one is saying "I offer my respectful obeisances to you." So by definition, in that word namaha, there's a difference. I just thought that was very profound.
It is profound. I found this, I marked this last verse as pivotal, a pivotal verse, an idea. We've been hearing so much about, from the Bhagavatam ever since the 5th canto, about abandoning the plans that we have for the material world and various desires and surrendering to Krishna. And here in just such a succinct way, Prahlad Maharaj is saying that this is what happens when you are able to abandon all of your own self-centered ideas and desires, is that you're free to completely embrace the existence of the Lord. It reminded me of Samoham Sarvabhuteshu Nami Dveshosti Na Priya Na Bhajanti Tumam Bhaktya Mai Te Teshu Chapyaham. Krishna says, I'm equal to everyone, but whoever surrenders unto me is in me, and I'm in him. And this is such an enticing idea to me, that you could just decide to abandon wholesale any kind of self-centered desires and just take up the mission of the Lord completely, following Prahlad Maharaj's example. And contrary to what the material mind thinks, one becomes he gains everything. You get everything. Whereas you hold on to these miserly little desires, and then you're prevented from actually entering into the existence of the Lord and having him fully enter into you. Maharaj is shaking his head yes, so we'd like to hear the comment of why he's shaking his head yes. This means profoundly yes.
Not my, but thy will, O Lord.
Havi Prabhu? See if you can top that. It's a poem.
It's curious.
It's a poem jam. Poet jam.
In this world, there's such a investment in energy and effort to generate an equal society, and it simply doesn't work. And then here it's a very clear statement that the Lord and the servant live in the same. Everybody lives in the highest standard of life.
Yeah, and also just the obvious point is that everyone wants to have the most opulence possible. But after hearing about Hiranyakashipu, we see that the greatest endeavor you could possibly make, and no one's ever going to beat him. I mean, it's always, the Olympic record's been smashed, and it's so far smashed for materialistic austerities that no one will ever duplicate it again. But still, Prahlad said within a second he lost it all, so I don't want anything to do with it. And it's so encouraging. It's information people don't have, that if you surrender to Krishna, then actually you become opulent and happy, just like you want. I mean, why didn't I think of this before? Okay, there it is. Where are we now? 11:11. Okay. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Prahlad, a devotee like you never desires any kind of material opulences, either in this life or in the next. Nonetheless, I order you to enjoy the opulences of the demons in this material world, acting as their king until the end of the duration of time occupied by Manu." Purport. One Manu lives for a duration of time calculated to be an aggregate of 71 yuga cycles, each of which equals 4,300,000 years. Although atheistic men like to enjoy material opulences, and they endeavor with great energy to build big residences, roads, cities, and factories, Unfortunately, they cannot live more than 80, 90, or at the utmost 100 years. Although the materialist exerts so much energy to create a kingdom of hallucinations, he is unable to enjoy it for more than a few years. However, because Prahlad Maharaj was a devotee, the Lord allowed him to enjoy material opulences as the king of the materialists. Prahlad Maharaj had taken birth in the family of Hiranyakashipu, who was the topmost materialist. And since Prahlad was the bona fide heir of his father, the Supreme Lord allowed him to enjoy the kingdom created by his father for so many years that no materialist could calculate them. A devotee does not have to desire material opulence, but if he is a pure devotee, there is ample opportunity for him to enjoy material happiness also without personal endeavor. Therefore, everyone is advised to take to devotional service under all circumstances. If one desires material opulence, he can also become a pure devotee, and his desires will be fulfilled. It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.3.10, Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udadati tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Whether one desires everything or nothing, or whether he desires to merge into the existence of the Lord, he is intelligent only if he worships Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by rendering transcendental loving service. 12. It does not matter that you are in the material world. You should always continuously hear the instructions and messages given by me, and always be absorbed in thought of me, for I am the Supersoul existing in the core of everyone's heart. Therefore give up fruitive activities and worship me. Purport. When a devotee becomes materially very opulent, one should not think that he is enjoying the results of his fruitive activities. A devotee in this material world uses all material opulences for the service of the Lord because he is planning how to serve the Lord with these opulences, as advised by the Lord himself. Whatever material opulence is within his possession, he engages to expand the glories and service of the Lord. A devotee never performs any fruitive or ritualistic ceremony to enjoy the results of such karma. Rather, a devotee knows that karma kanda is meant for the less intelligent man. Narottam Das Thakur says in his Prema Bhakti Chandrika, Karma kanda jnana karma keva lavishera bandha. Karma kanda jnana kanda keva lavishera bandha. Both karma kanda and jnana kanda, fruitive activities and speculation about the Supreme Lord, are like pots of poison. One who is attracted to karma kanda and jnana kanda spoils his existence as a human being. Therefore, devotee is never interested in karma kanda or jnana kanda, but is simply interested in favorable service to the Lord, anukulyena krishnanushilanam, or cultivation of spiritual activities in devotional service. T's are not D's. My dear Prahlad, while you are in this material world, you will exhaust all the reactions of pious activity. By feeling happiness and by acting piously, you will neutralize impious activity. Because of the powerful time factor, you will give up your body, but the glories of your activities will be sung in the upper planetary systems, and being fully freed from all bondage, you will return home back to Godhead. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Evam praladas yamshena sadhana siddhatvam nitya siddhatvam cha narada didvaj geyam. There are two classes of devotees, the sadhana siddha and the nitya siddha. Prahlad Maharaj is a mixed siddha. That is, he is perfect partly because of executing devotional service and partly because of eternal perfection. Thus he is compared to such devotees as Narada. Formerly Narada Muni was the son of a maidservant, and therefore in his next birth he attained perfection, sadhana siddhi, because of having executed devotional service. Yet he is also a nitya siddha because he never forgets the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word kushalena is very important. Which word? Kushalena. One should live in the material world very expertly. The material world is known as the world of duality because one sometimes has to act impiously and sometimes has to act piously. Although one does not want to act impiously, the world is so fashioned that there is always danger. Padam padam yad vipadam. Thus, even when performing devotional service, a devotee has to create many enemies. Yep. Prahlad Maharaj himself had experience of this, for even his father became his enemy. A devotee Supreme Lord, so that the reactions of suffering cannot touch him. This is the expert management of papa punya, pious and impious activities. A devotee should expertly manage to think always of the Supreme Lord so that the reactions of suffering cannot touch him. This is the expert management of papa punya, pious and impious activities. An exalted devotee like Prahlad Maharaj is Jivan Mukta. He is liberated even in this very life in the material body. Kushalena. You have to be expert. You have to live in the material world very expertly. 14. One who always remembers your activities and my activities also, and who chants the prayers you have offered, becomes free in due course of time from the reactions of material activities. Purport. Here it is stated that anyone who chants and hears about the activities of Prahlad Maharaj and in relationship with Prahlad's activities, the activities in the Sringadev, gradually becomes free from all the bondage of fruitive activities, as stated in Bhagavad-Gita 2.15, 2.56. Yam hina vyatayantyete purusham purusharshabha samatuka sukham tiram somratattvaya kalpate. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Dukeshvanu vigna manaha sukeshu vigataspriha vitaraga bhayakrodha stitadir muner uchate. One who is not disturbed in spite of the threefold miseries, who is not elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger is called a sage of steady mind. A devotee should not be aggrieved in an awkward position, nor should he feel extraordinarily happy in material opulence. This is the way of expert management of material life. Because a devotee knows how to manage expertly, he is called Jivan Mukta. Because a devotee knows how to manage expertly, he is called Jivan Mukta. As Rupa Goswami explains in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Iha yasya harer dasye karmana manasa gira nikilasyapyavastasu Jivan Mukta so uchate. A person acting in Krishna consciousness, or, in other words, in the service of Krishna, with his body, mind, intelligence, and words, is a liberated person even within this material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. Because of constantly engaging in devotional service, in any condition of life, a devotee is free from all material bondage. Bhakti punati manishta shvapakan apisambhavad. Even one born in a family of meat-eaters is purified if he engages in devotional service. Bhagavatam 11:14-21. Srila Jiva Goswami cites this verse in logically supporting that anyone who chants about the pure life and activities of Prahlad Maharaj is free from the reactions of material activities.
15 through 17. Little triple double here. Prahlad Maharaj said, O Supreme Lord, because you are so merciful to the fallen souls, I ask you for only one benediction. I know that my father, at the time of his death, had already been purified by your glance upon him, but because of his ignorance of your beautiful power and supremacy, he was unnecessarily angry at you, falsely thinking that you were the killer of his brother. Thus he directly blasphemed your lordship, the spiritual master of all living beings, and committed heavily sinful activities directed against me, your devotee. I wish that he be excused for these sinful activities. Babadi Bab. Purport. Although Hiranyakashipu was purified as soon as he came in contact with the Lord's lap and the Lord saw him, Prahlad Maharaj still wanted to hear from the Lord's own mouth that his father had been purified by the Lord's causeless mercy. Prahlad Maharaj offered this prayer to the Lord for the sake of his father. As a Vaishnava son, despite all the inconveniences imposed upon him by his father, he could not forget his father's affection. 18. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Prahlad, O most pure, O great saintly person, your father has been purified, along with 21 forefathers in your family. Because you were born in this family, the entire dynasty has been purified." Purport. The word tri saptabi means 7 multiplied by 3. In one's family, one can count back 4 or 5 generations to one's great-grandfather or even one's great-grandfather's grandfather. But since the Lord mentions 21 forefathers, this indicates that the benediction expands to other families also. Before the present family in which one has taken birth, one must have been born in other families. Whoa. Thus, when a Vaishnava takes birth in a family, by the grace of the Lord, he purifies not only that family, but also the families of his previous births. Text 19. Whenever and wherever there are peaceful, equipoised devotees who are well behaved and decorated with all good qualities, that place and the dynasties there, even if condemned, are purified. Purport. Wherever exalted devotees stay, not only they and their dynasties, but the entire country is purified. Text 20. My dear Prahlad, king of the Daityas, because of being attached to devotional service to me, my devotee does not distinguish between lower and higher living entities. In all respects, he is never jealous of anyone.
It reminds me of in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. How's the Bengali start? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I have it memorized, but I can't remember how it starts. But he's referring to a book called the Sri Krishna Vijay. Shri Nandanandana Krishna Mor Pranath. Shri Nandanandana Krishna Mor Pranath. He says in this verse that the essence of it is that there was a poet, a Vaishnava poet, and he wrote this book of poetry glorifying Krishna, and it wasn't perfectly written. You know, there were supposed to be sonnets, and there was supposed to be a certain number of meters per verse, and many of them are ragged. They don't actually do that. But because he says in the book, Sri Nandanandana Krishna Mor Pranath, that Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj, is my life and soul. What, you got it? Let's see. Nandanandana Krishna Mor Pranath E Bakke Vakainutar Vamshera Hatto. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj, is my life and soul. By this statement, I am sold into the hands of the descendants of Gunaraj Khan. So Gunaraj Khan wrote this poem, that little book. It became very popular. And then Mahaprabhu goes on to say, even a dog in that place is dear to me. Everybody there is dear to me. Because of that devotee wrote that book and is there in the town. What auspiciousness is spread by, you can think of by, I'm sorry, Marsha.
Of the world, and that's exactly what Prabhupada said. Exactly what Prabhupada said. My goal is to put a set of Bhagavatams in every house in the world.
He said every respectable gentleman. And I want this set of books to be in the home of every respectable gentleman. But I was thinking the same thing. You know, one book even that goes out. What to speak? He wrote this book. It was copied by hand, and Sri Krishna Vijay, and now because of that, the whole village becomes benedicted. What to speak of these books going out here, there, and everywhere with the, the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad-Gita, what kind of influence those are having on the planet. Thinking like that, instead of like tit for tat. You distributed 1 million books, where's your 1 million people that came back? It's short-sighted. 21. Those who follow your example will naturally become my pure devotees. You are the best example of my devotee, and others should follow in your footsteps. Purport: in this connection, Srila Madhvacharya quotes a verse from the Skanda Purana, Ratertu Vikandevan Naradam Dims Tataivacha Prahradad Utama Konyu Vishnu Bhaktau Jagatraye Naradadims Tataivacha. There are many, many devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they have been enumerated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.20 as follows. Swayambhur Narada Shambhu Kumara Kapilo Manu Prahlado Janako Bhishmo Balir Vayasakir Vayam. Of the 12 authorized devotees, Lord Brahma, Narada, Lord Shiva, Kapila Muni, and so on, Prahlad Maharaj is understood to be the best example. My dear child, your father has already been purified just by the touch of my body at the time of his death. Nonetheless, the duty of a son is to perform the Shraddha ritualistic ceremony after his father's death, so that his father may be promoted to a planetary system where he may become a good citizen and devotee. Says that Prabhu was already purified. He had to take birth on a higher planetary system. Prahlad Maharaj to perform anything in Vishwanath. Prahlad Maharaj was advised to perform the ritualistic ceremony as a matter of etiquette. For the Supreme Personality of God under no circumstances wants to stop the regulative principles. Madhva Muni also instructs, Madhu Kaitabao Bhaktya Bhava Dhurao Bhagavato Mritao Tama Eva Kramad Aptao Bhaktya Ched Yo Harim Yayao. When the demons Madhu and Kaitaba were killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, their kinsmen also observed the ritualistic ceremonies so that these demons could return home back to Godhead. Boy, just see the power of doing the ritualistic ceremonies after the death of somebody. See what I'm saying? Is it? Yeah. Actually, they died within a year of each other, and 16 months, and I thought I was going to get my father's ashes right away. My mom thought she was going to be really detached, but she wasn't. Afterwards, she's like, oh, I got to keep these. So when my mother died, then we got both the ashes, and we put them in the Jamuna at the same time. It's kind of far off. But yeah, we did that. We're reading in the first canto about after Kurukshetra, Yudhishthira was disconsolate about all the killings. He took it personally that he had done it, and it was his fault and everything. And I mean, so many relatives had died. And then they did these ceremonies there. And Krishna was there. He observed them also along with him. And when we were reading that section recently, we're just considering how important those are in human society. Not only for the ritualistic aspect, not just that it's ritualistic, but that there's some connection, there's a benefit. But also for the people who are left behind, they need closure. And I just see, like, it's really difficult to handle when somebody just dies. You actually have to process it for a while if you're really close and attached. and having these well-informed ceremonies where you feel like you're doing something, reaching back out. Like I remember after my mother died, and then, we did a program like we were supposed to. We had a feast, invited all the Vaishnavas. We offered prasadam and then offered to my mother's picture and all these things. Put her ashes and my father's into the Jamuna, and there's a feeling of completion, like you're not helpless. You can do something.
My dear mother, Nandarani Devi Dasi, has received a feast to her picture and offering every year in 2 places since she departed in 1997, here and in Radhakund.
It's curious to note that Dhritarashtra, although he was very heinous and unjust and cruel, still under the instructions of Vidura, he at that same lifetime he went back home.
Yeah. And this image of Hiranyakashipu in the next life going to the heavenly planets is just kind of like, hey, what are you doing here? It's like, I was Hiranyakashipu, I just had to come up here for a few eons and hang out with y'all. Hey, he was Hiranyakashipu. Shuffles into town. I'm sorry about all that. 23. After performing the ritualistic ceremonies, take charge of your father's kingdom. Sit upon the throne and do not be disturbed by materialistic activities. Please keep your mind fixed upon me, without transgressing the injunctions of the Vedas. As a matter of formality, you may perform your particular duties. Purport: When one becomes a devotee, he no longer has any duty to the Vedic regulative principles. One has many duties to perform, but if one becomes fully devoted to the Lord, he no longer has any such obligations. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.541, Devarshi bhuta nandranam pitranam the kinkaronayam ranicharajan sarvatmana yasharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihrittakartam. One who has fully surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord is no longer a debtor to his forefathers, the great sages, human society, the common man, or any living entity. The Supreme Personality of Godhead nonetheless advised Prahlad Maharaj to follow the regulative principles, for since he was going to be the king, others would follow his example. Thus, Lord Nrsingadev advised Prahlad Maharaj to engage in his political duties so that people would become the Lord's devotees. Yad yad acharati shreshtas tattadeve taro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokastad anivartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Bhagavad-Gita 3:21. One should not be attached to any materialistic activities, but a devotee may perform such activities as an example to show the common man that one should not deviate from the Vedic injunctions. 24. Sri Narada... Chikirshur Lokasangraham. Sri Narada Muni continued, thus, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead ordered, Prahlad Maharaj performed the ritualistic ceremonies for his father. O King Yudhishthira, he was then enthroned in the kingdom of Hiranyakashipu as directed by the Brahmanas. Purport: it is essential that society be divided into 4 groups of men: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Here we see that although Prahlad was perfect in every respect, he nonetheless followed the instructions of the Brahmanas, who performed the Vedic rituals. Therefore, in society there must be a very intelligent class of leaders who are well versed in the Vedic knowledge, so that they can guide the entire populace to follow the Vedic principles and thus gradually become most perfect and eligible to return home back to Godhead. 25. Lord Brahma, surrounded by the other demigods, was bright-faced because the Lord was pleased. Thus he offered prayers to the Lord with transcendental words.
How can you tell if the Lord's pleased with you? You become bright-faced. Remember what Prabhupada used to say? People would sometimes say, how do your devotees are also always bright-faced? How has that happened? 26. Lord Brahma said, O Supreme Lord of all lords, proprietor of the entire universe, O benedictor of all living entities, O original person, Adi Purusha, because of our good fortune, you have now killed this sinful demon who was giving trouble to the entire universe. Purport. The word Purvaja is described in Bhagavad-Gita 10.8. Ahang sarvasya prabhavo mattak sarvam pravartate. All the demigods, including Lord Brahma, are manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the original person, the cause of all causes, is Govinda, the Adi Purusham. Text 27. This demon, Hiranyakashipu, received from me the benediction that he would not be killed by any living being within my creation. With this assurance, and with strength derived from austerities and mystic power, he became excessively proud and transgressed all the Vedic injunctions. 28. By great fortune, Hiranyakashipu's son, Prahlad Maharaj, has now been released from death, for although he is a child, he is an exalted devotee. Now he is fully under the protection of your lotus feet. 29. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are the Supreme Soul. If one meditates upon your transcendental body, you naturally protect him from all sources of fear, even the imminent danger of death. Purport. Everyone is sure to die, for no one is excused from the hands of death, which is but a feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mrityu sarva haraschaham. When one becomes a devotee, however, he is not destined to die according to the limited duration of life. Everyone has a limited duration of life, but a devotee's lifetime can be extended by the mercy of the Supreme Lord, who is able to nullify the results of one's karma. Karmani nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhajam. This is the statement of Brahma Samhita. A devotee is not under the laws of karma. Therefore, even a devotee's scheduled death can be avoided by the causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord. God protects the devotee even from the extreme danger of death. 30. The Personality of Godhead replied, My dear Lord Brahma, O great Lord born from the lotus flower, just as it is dangerous to feed milk to a snake, so it is dangerous to give benedictions to demons, who are by nature ferocious and jealous. I warn you not to give such benedictions to any demon again. Narada Muni continued, O King Yudhishthir, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is not visible to an ordinary human being, spoke in this way, instructing Lord Brahma. Then, being worshipped by Brahma, the Lord disappeared from that place. 32. Prahlad Maharaj then worshipped and offered prayers to all the demigods, such as Brahma, Shiva, and the Prajapatis, who were all parts of the Lord. Thereafter, along with Shukracharya, and other great saints, Lord Brahma, whose seat is on the lotus flower, made Prahlad the king of all the demons and giants in the universe. Purport. By the grace of Lord Nrsimhadev, Prahlad Maharaj became a greater king than his father, Hiranyakashipu. Prahlad's inauguration was performed by Lord Brahma in the presence of other saintly persons and demigods. 34. O King Yudhishthir, after all the demigods, headed by Lord Brahma, were properly worshipped by Prahlad Maharaj, they offered Prahlad their utmost benedictions and then returned to their respective abodes. Text 35. Thus the two associates of Lord Vishnu, who had become Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, the sons of Diti, were both killed. By illusion, they had thought that the Supreme Lord, who was situated in everyone's heart, was their enemy. Purport. The discourse concerning Lord Nrsimhadev and Prahlad Maharaj began when Maharaj Yudhishthir asked Narada how Shishupal had merged into the body of Krishna. That was a long time ago. It's a few chapters ago. Shishupal and Dantavakra were the same Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Here Narada Muni is relating how in 3 different births the associates of Lord Vishnu were killed by Lord Vishnu himself. First they were the demons Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. 36. Being cursed by the Brahmanas, the same 2 associates took birth again as Kumbhakarna and the 10-headed Ravana. These 2 Rakshasas were killed by Lord Ramachandra's extraordinary power. 37. Pierced by the arrows of Lord Ramachandra, both Kumbhakarna and Ravana lay on the ground and left their bodies fully absorbed in thought of the Lord, just as they had in their previous births as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. 38. They both took birth again in human society as Shishupal and Dantavakra and continued in the same enmity toward the Lord. It is they who merged into the body of the Lord in your presence. Purport. Vairānubandhena, acting like the Lord's enemy, is also beneficial for the living entity. Kamad, dveshad, bayat, snehad, whether in lusty desire, anger, fear, or envy of the Lord, somehow or other, as recommended by Srila Rupa Goswami, tasmat kena pyubhayena, one should become attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and ultimately achieve the goal of returning home, back to Godhead. What then is to be said of one who is related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a servant, friend, father, mother, or conjugal lover? Text 39. Not only Shishupal and Dantavakra, but also many other kings who acted as enemies of Krishna attained salvation at the time of death. Because they thought of the Lord, they received spiritual bodies and forms the same as his, just as worms captured by a black drone obtain the same type of body as the drone. Purport. The mystery of yogic meditation is explained here. Real yogis always meditate on the form of Vishnu within their hearts. Consequently, at the time of death, they give up their bodies while thinking of the form of Vishnu and thus attain Vishnu Loka, Vaikuntha Loka, where they receive bodily features the same as those of the Lord. From the 6th canto we have already learned that when the Vishnu Dutas came from Vaikuntha to deliver Jamil, they looked exactly like Vishnu, with 4 hands and the same features as Vishnu. Therefore we may conclude that if one practices thinking of Vishnu and is fully absorbed in thinking of him at the time of death, one returns home, back to Godhead. Even enemies of Krishna, who thought of Krishna in fear, bhaya, such as King Kamsa, received bodies in a spiritual identity similar to that of the Lord. Text 40. By devotional service, pure devotees who incessantly think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead receive bodies similar to his. This is known as Sarupya Mukti. Although Shishupal, Dantavakra, and other kings thought of Krishna as an enemy, they also achieved the same results. Purport. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, in connection with Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Sanatana Goswami, it is explained that a devotee should externally execute his routine devotional service in a regular way, but should always inwardly think of the particular mellow in which he is attracted to the service of the Lord. This constant thought of the Lord makes the devotee eligible to return home back to Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad-Gita, Tyaktva deham punarjanma naitimam eti. After giving up his body, a devotee does not again receive a material body, but goes back to Godhead and receives a spiritual body resembling those of the Lord's eternal associates whose activities he followed. However the devotee likes to serve the Lord, he may constantly think of the Lord's associates, the cowherd boys, the gopis, the Lord's father and mother, his servants, and the trees, land, animals, plants, and water in the Lord's abode. Because of constantly thinking of these features, one acquires a transcendental position. Kings like Shishupal, Dantavakra, Kamsa, Pondraka, Narakasura, and Shalva were all similarly delivered. This is confirmed by Madhvacharya. Paundrake Narake Chaiva, Shalve Kamse Che Rukmini, Avishtas tu Harer Bhaktas, Tad Bhaktya Harimapire. Pondraka, Narakasura, Shalva, and Kamsa were all inimical toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but because all these kings constantly thought of him, they achieved the same liberation, Sarupya Mukti. The Jnana Bhakta, the devotee who follows the path of Jnana, also attains the same destination. If even the enemies of the Lord achieve salvation by constantly thinking about the Lord, what is to be said of pure devotees who always engage in the Lord's service and who think of nothing but the Lord in every activity?
"41. Everything you asked about how Shishupal and others attained salvation, although they were inimical, has now been explained to you by me." In this narration about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, various expansions or incarnations of the Lord have been described, and the killing of the two demons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, has also been described. Purport: Avatars or incarnations are expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Govinda. Advaitam achyutam anadim ananta rupam adyam purana purusham navayovanam cha videshu durlamam adurlamam bhaktao govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, who is the original person, non-dual, infallible, and without beginning. Although he expands into unlimited forms, he is still the original, and although he is the oldest person, he always appears as a fresh youth. Such eternal, blissful, and all-knowing forms of the Lord cannot be understood by the academic wisdom of the Vedas, but they are always manifest to pure unalloyed devotees. Brahma Samhita 533. The Brahma Samhita describes the avatars. Indeed, all the avatars are described in the authentic scriptures. No one can become an avatar or incarnation, although this has become fashionable in the age of Kali. The avatars are described in the authentic scriptures, Shastras, and therefore, before one risks accepting a pretender as an avatar, one should refer to the Shastras. The Shastras say everywhere that Krishna is the original personality of Godhead and that he has innumerable avatars or incarnations. Elsewhere in the Brahma Samhita it is said, Ramadi Muti Shukalani Amina Tishtan. Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, and many others are consecutive expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After Krishna comes Balaram. After Balaram is Sankarshana, then Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Narayana, and then the Purusha avatars. Mahavishnu, Garbhadakshayi Vishnu, and Shiradakshayi Vishnu all of them are avatars. One must hear about the avatars. Narrations about such avatars are called avatarikata, the narrations of Krishna's expansions. Hearing and chanting these narrations is completely pious. Shinvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtanaha. One who hears and chants can become punya, purified of material contamination. Whenever there are references to the avatars, religious principles are established, and demons who are against Krishna are killed. The Krishna consciousness movement is spreading all over the world with two aims: to establish Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and to kill all the pretenders who falsely present themselves as avatars. The preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement must carry this conviction very carefully within their hearts and kill the demons who, in many tactful ways, vilify the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. If we take shelter of Nrsingadev and Prahlad Maharaj, it will be easier to kill the demons who are against Krishna and to thus re-establish Krishna's supremacy. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the Supreme Lord, the original Lord. Prahlad Maharaj is our Guru, and Krishna is our worshipable God. As advised by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhukti Lata Bij. If we can be successful in getting the mercy of Prahlad Maharaj, and also that of Nrsingadev, then our Krishna consciousness movement will be extremely successful. The demon Hiranyakashipu had so many ways to try to become God himself, but although Prahlad Maharaj was chastised and threatened in many ways, he rigidly refused to accept his powerful demoniac father as God. Following in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj, we should reject all the rascals who pretend to be God. We must accept Krishna and his incarnations and no one else. Yes, Prabhu? Well, in other places, Prabhupada gives the definition of what it means to kill. He says repeatedly elsewhere that killing means to kill their demoniac spirit. He says, of course, in Kali Yuga you'd have to kill everybody. And he also said that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came without weapons, and except his beauty was a weapon. And that was meant to kill the demoniac spirit, which he did so many times. There's examples of how Jagai Madai and so many others had demoniac spirit, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu killed it. So that's what it means. And Prabhupada said, even in practical terms, this is not something that we could possibly do. Of course, we don't even bring that up. It's not a possibility necessarily. Is that better? Oh, here's the mic.
Like this to my father, and tells him that such people should be killed.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the letter.
Yeah.
I won't mention the name who he's referring to, but in a literal way, it seems like that.
Well, call your dad. Tell him to get busy.
Like we see in the world, ISIS and other extreme religious groups. As Kali Yuga progresses, there may be the need for this.
Well, Srila Prabhupada would say things like that, meaning, well for the world, good for the world, if this person would be killed. But he's not saying that we should go out and kill him. That's taking it to one step too far.
You got to look in the context also. I mean, this is the pastime of Lord Nrsingadev. He just tore Hiranyakashipu to shreds. So there's a spirit of Vira Ras here that Prabhupada's in, like kill them all. And but that's why it's important to read all of Prabhupada's books. Anybody can take out one section here, and people will. And they'll say, look, you guys are fanatics. It's like, look at this. But we should know what Prabhupada meant by that. There are multiple places where Prabhupada, explains what this means in context. Any other thing you were going to say?
It is said that in this age, the enemy or the demon lives also in everyone's heart, so we should kill everyone.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned, that Prabhupada said, okay, demonic spirit, you'll have to kill everybody. Yeah?
We do see a lot of demoniac things taking place on the planet.
Yeah.
Massive cow slaughter, deforestation, etc. There are extreme planet warriors or vegan groups. And in the anarchists. In the UK, the government considered environmental terrorism now a crime because people are going to extreme lengths to try and prevent the environment from being damaged, because there are actual demoniac things taking place on the planet. But our business is not to fight it on that level. It's to fight it more with the devotional aspects of changing the heart.
Whenever Krishna comes, or Vishnu, he's got weapons in his hands and he uses them. But Lord Chaitanya's weapons are his devotees and the holy name and his associates. So those are our weapons, and that's what it means to kill them, to kill the demoniac.
I mean, what is it, killing the demoniac spirit? It's bringing people back to connection with Krishna. As a very practical example about the environment, this idea that you can just trash the planet and cut down trees without any concern, this is a demoniac mentality. It's not seeing that the earth and all the planets are the body of God. Even in the so-called, primitive cultures and in various places in South America, people, before they would cut down a tree, they would do a ceremony to the goddess in the tree. And, we need this place, we're really sorry, we have to take it down. And they would acknowledge the fact that there's a sacredness within nature. This is actually the basis of real human society, is this understanding. Nowadays there's this idea that we have no concern for the universal body of the Lord. We just trash everything. And so there is, even with the extreme environmentalists, they don't have that connection. They may even be atheists and just feel that, in a disjointed way, that this seems wrong to kill nature and so forth. But the Krishna consciousness movement is able to actually give the real reason why there should be environmentalism, and the spirit that it should be done in. That everything, it's a sacred earth, and all the living entities in it are sacred. Unless somebody has that, they won't be able to have a universal application for environmentalism. Even the vegans are running, it was just announced recently that avocados are not vegan. I mean, they're going to run out of food. Because avocados and another really popular vegan food is not vegan anymore. Because they have to transport bees to different countries in order to pollinate them. Otherwise, the trees won't give the fruit. It's official. You're vegan, avocados are out, unless you're a cheater. Mukharvind, Prabhu. Lucky I'm not a vegan.
Maharaj, one comment and question. In the environmentalist, I remember when Radhika Raman Prabhu came and he was sharing that he took that portion of prachetas when they awake and then they saw the whole world was filled with trees. Then he very nicely given some analogy that how there should be balance. That he took that particular section and he presented in some very big conference about the environment, how the Bhagavatam.
That's right.
I'm not exactly recalling, but he sort of how the balance should be there, like how when they saw that they did, but then it was not like without thinking. There was some purpose, because it was just overtaken the whole.
Yeah, he's recounting how Radhika Raman Prabhu just gave a seminar at ISV before we left. Pardon me? Nice. And one of the points that he made was a very ingenious paper that he had written about the prachetas and the incident of them burning up the trees and so forth. I mean, how do you explain that in an academic conference? And he had a really nice insight into it. But I think the point is, too, that we have to be expert in presenting these kinds of arguments that get at the root of the problem. I don't also remember the exact points he made, although I have them in my notes. nearby, but it was ingenious and it was well received also, and that when those kinds of when preachers are out and they're well informed and they're thoughtful and they present these arguments, it could actually change things one person at a time and kill their demoniac spirit by reconnecting them to the proper conception of the Bhagavatam. Was that your point, Mukharvind?
I'd like to say, as I said yesterday, that when we read like this, Prabhupada's books, just read them. I mean, we're having really nice reflections, but what makes them really nice is the fact that we've heard for half an hour, 45 minutes, or even more sometimes, straight purports of Srila Prabhupada's books, and they just train our spiritual intelligence to be able to see things and be able to give, insights. And I'm convinced after seeing what I've seen over the last year, that even young people today, even millennials, when they hear Prabhupada's purports, they kind of get it at a level which it's almost like when we were, when I met Matt and I looked at him and I was speaking to him and I saw myself 40 years ago, and he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I saw myself 40 years from now in a mirror, like when I was talking to you." So it's like a cycle, and it's coming to that point where there's going to be more and more young people who can actually hear Prabhupada's purports like this. So I'm promoting this idea that if we do this more, wherever we are, with whoever we're with, we'll get the strength and the conviction to do what he's saying properly, without compromising the philosophy and trying to say something that's make us more attractive to them rather than bring them into the reality of what is actually spiritual. I was thinking another thing, that is that, when we go out and we see what's going on in India, especially Uttar Pradesh, so much trash and so much pollution and so much whatever. But then every once in a while you'll come to a wall that they built and there's a tree branch going, and they just kind of build the wall around it.
They put a tree in the middle of the street.
Or no, they built it.
What was it? Chadaratma showed one that was like the street's going, and there's just the tree, big huge tree right in the lane coming out because they didn't want to cut it down when they built
exactly.
the tree.
That's what exactly. So you can see like that, it's something still there, as weird as it looks, Anyway, Hare Krishna.
Last couple points. Gopal's not convinced.
When McDonald's was built in Mathura, near the refinery, there were some devotees in Vrindavan. We were going to take it down. Like literally, pretty seriously. Some of my friends had gone out there and made some attempts at graffitiing their signs, etc. And just the thing about killing the cows. It's so demoniac. It's the cause of war. And how do we turn people away from killing cows? I mean, it's happening in India. It's happening all over the world.
Well, I think that there has to be a comprehensive, long-term, and sustained effort to do things like that. If you just do terrorist acts, you'll be taken down you'll be tracked down, you'll be incarcerated, and so forth, and it won't have that much effect. I visited in Belize a botanical garden that was created by this botanist, and she had been for years trying to stop the deforestation of the rainforest. And then she developed a new doctrine, which was to show all the benefits of the various plants in the rainforest to the pharmaceutical industry. And so she reasoned that the only way that they would ultimately be able to the only way they ultimately would be able to make a difference would be to show the economic benefit of the rainforest. And then, there could be a systemic change. I mean, if there's an economic incentive, then I'm just giving this as an example of a macro kind of a solution rather than micro, like I'm going to blow the place up, individually and stuff. It won't make that much difference to the overall operation, graffitiing one franchise or something. But if there's a larger incentive and people are connected in a coalition, then there can be some ultimate change.
In the long term, Prabhupada told us many times that if you want to change, you have to change the hearts of the people. And that's why this mass book distribution is actually the answer. Even making your point, or agreeing with your point, that without having a prayas approach, where you got to have a result now, or else there's something wrong with what we're doing. If you keep doing this over generations and generations and generations, this will happen. It will happen like that, because we're seeing, relatively speaking, a much more sizable population who know about Krishna and are much more favorable to ideas that do cherish the ideas that we're talking about. Because there's a movement away from democracy now in many countries to the far right, nationalism, white supremacy, and all these nasty things. But there's a thing happening underneath, even in America now, just happened. The people will rise up because they can't, the hearts of people, they can't. And if enough of them do it, then things will change. But to try to do it the other way, it's really dangerous.
43-44. This narration describes the characteristics of the great and exalted devotee Prahlad Maharaj, his staunch devotional service, his perfect knowledge, and his perfect detachment from material contamination. It also describes the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the cause of creation, maintenance, and annihilation. Prahlad Maharaj in his prayers has described the transcendental qualities of the Lord, and has also described how the various abodes of the demigods and demons, regardless of how materially opulent, are destroyed by the mere direction of the Lord. Purport. Srimad Bhagavatam is filled with descriptions of the characteristics of various devotees with reference to the service of the Lord. This Vedic literature is called Bhagavatam because it deals with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotee. By studying Srimad Bhagavatam under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master, one can perfectly understand the science of Krishna, the nature of the material and spiritual worlds, and the aim of life. Srimad Bhagavatam, Amalam Puranam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless Vedic literature, as we have discussed in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, simply by understanding Srimad Bhagavatam, one can understand the science of the activities of the devotees, the activities of the demons, the permanent abode, and the temporary abode. Through Srimad Bhagavatam, everything is perfectly known, which reminds me also in this general discussion about righting wrongs and re-spiritualizing society. It was just mentioned how even in the heavenly planets there are upheavals. You have basically a society in upper planetary systems which is predominantly in Sattva Gun, and everything runs pretty well. There's no cow slaughter and everything like that. But then you get, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Hiranyakashipu taking the whole place over and ruining everything. He reverted everything back. His goons came out and chopped down trees, burned all the, killed cows, everything. And so, it's the nature of the material world running in various cycles. Prabhupada mentions in that section that, wherever you go, he quoted Brahma Bhuvana Loka, from topmost planet down to the lowest. You're not going to find a place that remains stably in any situation for very long because of the shifting modes of nature. Not saying that we don't endeavor in every way possible, but we also have to be realistic. Furthermore, there's a way in which, when the demigods were defeated, that Vishnu told them, you have to wait, because this isn't the time. In fact, when we come to the 8th canto, we find that he actually recommends make an armistice with the demons, because you can't defeat them right now, so you got to cooperate with them. That's why they churned the ocean, to get the nectar. Armistice means that they work together, because it's a ceasefire, and it's just the way that you have to do it sometimes. So it's a long-term and very considered approach. Last verse before the break. The principles of religion by which one can actually understand the Supreme Personality of God are called Bhagavata Dharma. In this narration, therefore, which deals with these principles, actual transcendence is properly described. Purport: through the principles of religion, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Brahman, the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord, and Paramatma, the localized aspect of the Lord. When one is well conversant with all these principles, he becomes a devotee and performs Bhagavata Dharma. Prahlad Maharaj, the spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession, advised that this Bhagavata Dharma be instructed to students from the very beginning of their education. Komara achurat pragno dharman bhagavatan iha. To understand the science of the Supreme Personality of God, it is the real purpose of education. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. One must simply hear about and describe Lord Vishnu. This narration concerning Prahlad Maharaj and Lord Nrsingadev, therefore, has properly described spiritual, transcendental subjects. And that brings us to the cow break. We'll be back here at 25 minutes after. Gaur Premanande Haribo.